So you don't want your friends to feel like you're being transactional, but also you just have a limited amount of time in your day. So
Sure.
I think it comes down to where are you going to put that time investment and invest in people. And you obviously need people to reciprocate it, because not everybody who you want to be friends with, unfortunately, has the time or interest to be friends with you.
Sure.
What do you think? Is there like a right amount of friends that you think that you can manage actually creating and maintaining relationships with?
I mean, this is an area of rich study, right? I think probably like the most popular view of that is Robin Dunbar's analysis, right? The Dunbar numbers around 150, and roughly speaking, that was Dunbar's view of the number of kind of meaningful relationships you can sustain. But that was intended to encompass both the professional and personal.
Did Dunbar know Joey Diaz?
No,
Joey Diaz, who said you don't need 100 friends, you just need 3 of those.
No, I don't think that was in Dunbar's seminal work on the topic, but absolutely, Diaz should pen a follow-on work.
He probably read Dunbar and came up with this.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably also where No New Friends came from.
Day ones.
Day ones. I know your question's not actually about number. I tend to think, though, maybe related to Mr. Diaz, like about friendships and relationships and kinds of spheres. And I think that particularly, I see this a lot in the city. It's actually funny. A moment ago, we were talking about transactional relationships. I think New York is like a hotbed of transactional relationships. And I think that's actually a big analog or inhibitor of people building the connections that they want to in this city, because there's always a feeling that there's something more exciting you could be doing, or another connection you could make that would greatly benefit you personally, or it's an ambitious city. So I think that's both natural, and at times I can understand that leads to feelings of, isolation and disconnection.
Yeah. I mean, also it's in some ways natural, in other ways it's not. I mean, there always have been cities, but have there been cities with 10 million people living on a 200 square mile island or however big Manhattan is? Like, the only reason that is possible is because of technology. The wonders of building buildings on top of each other, plumbing, the sewer system, the garbage disposal, transportation. Like, it's sort of like we're in this completely unnatural setting, and we're just fending for ourselves and trying to survive. So it's almost like no surprise that there are some phenomena to try to make friends in the city. But the one that I think is the most difficult to wrap my mind around is that there are so many people in New York, yet it feels so hard to make new friends. Like, people are there, but how do you actually break in and meet them? And you work at a extraordinarily large company. You said 700,000 people. So do you feel like that phenomenon also exists in the corporate setting, or do you feel in some ways that, okay, there are more people, it is actually easier to find people that, share my interests?
That's a good question. I mean, I was just trying to think through the numbers as you were saying that, because, maybe using, my company as a little bit of like a relative study, right? So I'm probably going to get the numbers on this wrong, but I think there's close to 7,000 or 8,000 people that work for my company in the New York metro area. Now, that encompasses Florham Park, that encompasses parts of New Jersey, parts of Connecticut, kind of the broader metropolitan area. But that's still many more people, probably by over an order of magnitude, than I can build meaningful relationships with. Now, if you zoom in even further, like the practice that I'm most closely related to, this talent and organization strategy practice, that group is probably 200 to 300 people in New York City. So if we go by Dunbar's number, even the number of people who just kind of work in the same space that I work in, just in this city in North America, represents a greater number of individuals than I could ever build really meaningful relationships with. Baseline familiarity, of course, name recognition, easy. But, I think so one, I think to your question, I do think that there are some parallels. I think however you want to cut it, by school system, by alumni, by ethnic background or economic background, by metro area, we're all going to belong to communities whose scale far exceeds our ability to nurture those relationships. I mean, I moved out to the Catskills, and my town is 1,000 people. So, I think that maybe I don't know exactly know how to phrase this, because I don't want to put it in a pejorative way, but there is kind of a dirty truth, which is I feel like when I first came to this city, or I was moving to cities earlier in my career, I had kind of an infinitely abundant mindset. I was curious about everyone. And that I think fuels a lot of my pro-socialness, despite the fact that I'm very, very introverted. It takes a lot of energy. Is I am fundamentally curious about this sort of Sonder-like concept that everybody has a life as rich as mine, and I want to know their stories. That's what I'm curious about. And I think I burned out socially early on in Dallas, eventually Chicago, London, now in New York. And I started realizing that there's actually a kind of, it's not dispassionate because it is emotional, but a kind of ruthless prioritization over my energy, to your point, and time that I have to put in. And so I think of it more as there has to be a hierarchy within relationships, because you need that hierarchy to make decisions. It can be a sophisticated hierarchy. Like the hierarchy of relationships for me to play Rocket League is very, very different than the hierarchy of relationships to show up at the hospital,
right.
You know? But, you know, I'm very lucky to be married to a wonderful person. And, you know, I know there's if you think back to chemistry class when you were learning about like electron spheres, like valence spheres and things like that, like my, first order valence sphere is one person, and that's Kim, and that's a non-negotiable. And that's beyond ride or die. That's the only
legally
thing.
Binding.
Legally binding, involuntarily and enthusiastically participatory. That's the thing that can't change, because that's anchored. If you wanted to get even more philosophical, as somebody who's spent a fair amount of time in psychoanalysis and therapy, you could argue that actually the nucleus is also one, which is me. It's like putting my own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
But then what I would say is that second kind of valence layer, that second sort of sphere of friends, I've discovered is actually pretty small. And by that, I mean people that I'm communicating with on a daily basis. These are probably the ride or die folks. It includes people from family, but not all of my family. And it includes friends, but it doesn't even include friends that I speak to daily. It is a kind of, it's an existential essentialness to those relationships. Like those are the relationships that form a huge part of who I am.
Yeah.
And for whom I'm willing to do, pretty much anything. And then you go pretty quickly from there. But I think that what I might offer, I guess, as a reflection on that is that's how I choose to concentrate. A lot of electrons really close to the nucleus. And then I'm willing to let a bunch of things kind of drift out in the looser spheres.
Float in the quantum cloud space.
In the uncertainty
We don't know
space.
where the electron is. We just know it's there, type of thing.
Yeah, I'm realizing like self-critical things about myself, which is like, and that means, I think in reality, that anybody at work can get 30 minutes with me no matter what. Like you can reach out to my EA, get time. I will make time for it no matter what. Will I be diligent?
Your calendar just got booked through 2020.
Yeah. Will I maintain that relationship with diligence? A lot of that is up to the other person, to be honest. But it's because I'm willing to let this kind of like, again, like looser cloud of things drift. And that's how I maintain my own sanity.